My name is Noelle Hartman, and I never thought I'd become the woman people whispered about after a celebration went wrong. I walked into a room believing I was loved, and walked out knowing I'd been replaced in public. What happened next changed everything. If you've ever trusted the wrong person, this is for you. Tell me where you're watching from, and hit subscribe. You're not alone here. I should have known something was wrong when he told me to wear red. Not casually, deliberately. He stood in the doorway of our bedroom, smiling too much, eyes scanning me like he was checking boxes. Red dress. He said it would look good under the lights. I laughed, made a joke about him suddenly having opinions about fashion, and he kissed my cheek like everything was normal. The drive there felt strange. He kept tapping the steering wheel, glancing at his phone, adjusting the rearview mirror even though it didn't need it. When we pulled up to the restaurant, I saw valet lines, people dressed better than us, a small crowd gathered near the entrance. I thought, wow, he really went all out. Inside, the hostess smiled too brightly and said, "You're early," then corrected herself. "Oh, sorry. You're with him." She gestured toward my husband. He squeezed my hand harder than necessary. "Let's go," he said. The private room doors were open. Music played. Loud, celebratory. There were balloons. Champagne flutes already poured. A banner stretched across the far wall, glittering under warm lights. It didn't have my name on it. It had hers. For half a second, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. I scanned the room, waiting for the punchline, the prank reveal, the moment where everyone shouted that it was a joke. Instead, people turned toward us. Conversation stopped. A few smiles faltered. Then someone clapped. "About time," a woman laughed. "We thought you weren't coming." My husband released my hand. That's when I saw her, standing near the cake wearing white, holding a glass of champagne like she belonged there. She froze when she saw me. Her smile cracked, then reset into something rehearsed. "Oh," she said softly. "You came." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My chest felt like it had collapsed inward, like all the air had been sucked out at once. The cake behind her read, "Congratulations." Not a birthday, not an anniversary. Congratulations. Someone leaned over to me, one of his coworkers I realized distantly, and whispered, "I didn't know he was still married." Still. My husband cleared his throat. "This isn't how I wanted you to find out." That sentence landed like a slap. "So you did want me to find out," I said. My voice sounded steady, which surprised me. He winced. "No, I mean, eventually. We were going to talk." A few people shifted uncomfortably. Phones were out. I could see them now, screens angled just slightly downward, pretending not to record while recording everything. I looked at the banner again. Then at the table full of gifts. Then at her hand, barely shaking as she set her glass down. "How long?" I asked him. "Have you been planning this?" He hesitated. That hesitation told me more than any confession ever could. She stepped forward. "I didn't know you'd be here," she said, like that made it better. Like I'd accidentally wandered into my own humiliation. I turned to her slowly. "You're standing under a banner he paid for with my money." That got a reaction. A few gasps. Someone laughed nervously. My husband snapped, "That's not fair." I smiled then. A small, sharp thing. "Oh, it's fair. You just didn't expect witnesses." The room felt suddenly too small, too bright. Every sound was amplified. The clink of glasses, the hum of the speakers, the quiet buzz of phones vibrating with incoming messages from people already spreading what they were seeing. She whispered his name. He didn't look at her. I realized then what this really was. Not a mistake, not a lapse. This was a replacement ceremony. He hadn't just cheated, he had staged my removal. "So this is the part where I pretend I didn't see it," I said, "where I go home quietly and let you finish celebrating." "Noelle," he started. I held up my hand. "Don't say my name like you still get to use it." Silence dropped heavy and complete. I reached for my purse. My hands didn't shake. I made sure of that. I wanted them to remember me calm. As I turned to leave, someone muttered, "This is brutal." They had no idea. At the door, I stopped and looked back, not at him, but at the room, at the people who had known, at the woman who thought she'd won something. "I hope you enjoy what you're celebrating," I said, "because you just inherited a man who betrays in public and lies in private." Her face went pale. I walked out. The valet rushed forward, confused, asking questions I didn't answer. Outside, the night air hit my lungs like permission to breathe again. My phone buzzed immediately. Then again. Then nonstop. I didn't check it. I got into the car alone and sat there, hands on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. My reflection in the windshield looked different, older, sharper. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't broken, but because something else had taken its place. Clarity. He thought humiliation would keep me small. He thought witnesses would make me quiet. He thought I'd beg for explanations behind closed doors. He was wrong. As I drove away, one thought anchored itself so deeply it felt permanent. I wasn't leaving him. I was leaving the version of myself that ever trusted him, and I was going to make sure he remembered this night for the rest of his life. People like to say betrayal comes out of nowhere. That's not true. It comes quietly, stacking small lies on top of everyday life until the weight finally collapses. I met my husband 12 years ago, back when everything still felt negotiable. Careers, cities, dreams. He liked that I was steady. He said that word a lot. Steady. As if I were something solid he could build against. We married young enough to believe love alone was a strategy. We built a life that looked good from the outside. A clean house, a growing bank account, a rhythm that worked. When our daughter was born, I slowed down. Not because he asked me to, but because someone had to. I turned down promotions, shifted to consulting, took on the invisible labor that never shows up on spreadsheets. He said we were a team. He said my sacrifices were temporary. They never are. The money story matters. I didn't understand that at first. Part of our down payment came from an inheritance I received after my mother died. Money she'd saved quietly, deliberately for my future. I put it into our home without hesitation. We didn't draw up anything formal because I trusted him. Because we were married. Because people don't plan exits when they still believe in arrivals. Over the years, the tone changed. He traveled more. Worked later. His phone became something he guarded instead of something he forgot on the counter. I noticed, but I explained it away. Everyone's busy. Everyone changes. Marriage, I told myself, wasn't supposed to feel exciting forever. Then there were the little moments that didn't fit, the sudden interest in clothes I'd never seen him wear, the credit card statements that didn't quite line up, dinners he couldn't remember the details of, a name he mentioned once, then never again. I clocked it all, stored it somewhere deep, told myself I was being paranoid. Women are taught to doubt their instincts before they ever doubt a man. The night before the restaurant, he barely slept. I remember watching his back rise and fall, his breathing shallow, restless. He got up before dawn and showered, humming under the water like he was excited. When I asked what the occasion was, he smiled and said, "Just wait." I waited. After I left that room, after the banner, the cake, the looks, I drove until my hands started to ache. I ended up in a grocery store parking lot because it was bright and anonymous. I finally checked my phone. There were messages already. Friends. A cousin. Someone had posted a clip online. I didn't watch it. I didn't need to. I'd lived it. Then my daughter called. She was at a sleepover. She sounded small. Careful. "Mom," she said. "Are you okay?" That was the moment the ground shifted. Because whatever he'd done to me, it had now reached her. "I'm okay," I said, which was a lie but a necessary one. "Why?" She hesitated. "Dad told me not to say anything. But I don't like secrets." My chest tightened. "What secrets, sweetheart?" Another pause. Then, very quietly, He's been picking me up late from school sometimes. He says we're getting dinner, but we're not. We go sit in the car while he talks to someone. I closed my eyes. Who? She sits in the front seat, my daughter said. Dad said she's a friend from work. But friends don't hold hands like that. That was it. Not the banner. Not the cake. Not the room full of witnesses. That sentence. I thanked her for telling me. I told her none of this was her fault. I told her I loved her more than anything, which felt suddenly insufficient. After I hung up, I sat there and let the truth finish settling. This wasn't new. It wasn't impulsive. He had folded his betrayal into our child's routine. He had normalized it. That meant something in him had already crossed every line that mattered. Later that night, a friend came over. She didn't knock. She just walked in and wrapped her arms around me. She didn't ask if it was true. I've been waiting for you to see it, she said. How long? I asked. She swallowed. Long enough to be ashamed. That hurt almost as much as everything else. She told me what she knew. How people talked. How he stopped correcting assumptions about his marriage months ago. How the woman thought I already knew. How no one warned me because they didn't want to be the one to cause drama. Drama. As if my life were a rumor instead of a fact. By the time she left, the story was complete. Not just what he'd done, but what was at stake if I stayed silent. My daughter's sense of right and wrong. My mother's money. My own future. My dignity. I didn't feel rage yet. Rage comes later. What I felt was resolve. Because once betrayal is undeniable, the question isn't what happened. It's what you do next. I didn't sleep that night. Not in the dramatic way people imagine. No pacing, no sobbing on the bathroom floor. I lay still and stared at the ceiling, listening to the house breathe around me. Every creak felt like a memory asking to be re-examined. By morning, grief had burned itself out, leaving something colder and more useful behind. Clarity doesn't announce itself. It settles in quietly and refuses to leave. He didn't come home. That told me everything I needed to know about where his priorities were. I made coffee anyway. Packed my daughter's lunch the way I always did. Life doesn't pause just because someone breaks it. After I dropped her at school, I sat in the car and made a list. Not emotional, practical. First, control. I called the bank, froze the joint account, changed the passwords to everything that was in my name. I knew which ones those were because I'd set them up years ago, back when he still needed help navigating forms and deadlines. The representative asked if I was sure. I said yes without hesitation. Then I called my attorney. I didn't have to explain much. I'd referred friends to her before. She listened, asked precise questions, and told me what mattered most in the first 48 hours. Documentation. Silence. Speed. I drove home and started pulling records, mortgage papers, statements, screenshots, old emails I'd archived and forgotten about, the inheritance transfer from my mother's estate, every receipt that proved what I'd contributed and what he'd assumed was his by default. By noon, my phone lit up with his name. I didn't answer. He texted, "We need to talk." I didn't respond. Another message followed. This got out of hand. "Please." I left it unread. When he finally came home late afternoon, he looked like someone who had expected chaos and found order instead. The house was quiet. Too quiet. My suitcase was by the door, not packed to leave, but packed for him. He stopped when he saw it. "What is this?" he asked. "A courtesy," I said. "You don't need to guess what's happening." His face tightened. "You're overreacting." I laughed once. Not kindly. "You staged a public announcement for your affair. Let's not pretend this is sudden." He ran a hand through his hair. "You froze the account." "Yes." "You can't do that." "I already did." His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then back at me. "She's upset. This isn't fair to her." That was the moment something inside me shut completely. "You involved our child," I said. "You forfeited the right to talk about fairness." He opened his mouth, then closed it. Shock flickered across his face, not because he felt guilt, but because he realized I knew more than he'd planned for me to know. "I'm staying with a friend," he said finally. "You'll take your things," I replied. "Tonight." He stared at me. "You're kicking me out of my own house?" I walked past him and opened the closet, pulled out the box I'd already prepared. His documents, his watches, his clothes folded with more care than he'd shown me in months. "This house is partially funded by my inheritance," I said evenly. "My attorney will explain the rest." He went quiet then, truly quiet. As he packed, my phone rang again. "Unknown number." I answered. "You're smarter than this," he said, voice low. "We can fix it." I looked at him across the room while he spoke, watching the performance up close. "You didn't fix it when it was private," I said. "You won't fix it now that it's public." He swallowed. "What do you want?" That question used to matter. It didn't anymore. "I want my life back," I said, "and I'm taking it." He left just after sunset. No apology, no goodbye. An hour later, his shock arrived. Emails bouncing, cards declining, calls going unanswered. He tried the house line. I unplugged it. I sat at the kitchen table and exhaled for the first time all day. This wasn't revenge yet. This was positioning. And by the time he realized what was happening, I was already several moves ahead. The consequences didn't arrive all at once. They rolled in, steady and unavoidable, like a tide he hadn't bothered to check before stepping into the water. By the next morning, he realized the freeze wasn't symbolic. His credit cards declined at a coffee shop near his office. I knew because he texted me a screenshot like it was proof of a misunderstanding. "There's an issue with the account." As if the bank had acted independently, as if money just vanished on its own. I didn't reply. An hour later, his office manager called. Not me. Him. Payroll had flagged something. His direct deposit had been redirected. Benefits access was temporarily suspended pending documentation. None of it illegal. None of it dramatic. Just enough friction to slow him down. That was the point. Meanwhile, the woman from the restaurant, his public upgrade, found out what it felt like to step into a life built on borrowed stability. She showed up at his workplace that afternoon, expecting reassurance, maybe protection. Instead, she was escorted out by security after someone recognized her from the video circulating online. She wasn't famous. She was visible. There's a difference. By lunch, whispers had turned into questions. By mid-afternoon, questions turned into conclusions. People don't need proof when a story fits too neatly. I stayed quiet. Silence has a way of making other people talk faster. My friend forwarded me messages I didn't ask for, screenshots from group chats I wasn't in anymore. His coworkers speculating. Someone posting, then deleting. Someone else reposting with commentary. The tone shifted quickly, from surprise to judgment. He embarrassed her. He involved their kid. Why would anyone do that publicly? No one defended him. Not really. At school pickup, a mother I barely knew squeezed my arm and said, "I'm sorry." She didn't ask questions. She didn't need answers. The story had already reached her phone. That night, my daughter asked why Dad hadn't called. "He's dealing with the consequences of his choices," I said carefully. "That doesn't change how much you're loved." She nodded. Kids understand accountability better than adults give them credit for. 2 days later, his brother called me. "I didn't know," he said. "But I know now." That sentence mattered more than anything else he said. He told me their parents were furious. Not performatively, deeply. Public shame does that. It doesn't just stain one person. It spreads. Family dinners were canceled, invitations quietly withdrawn. The version of my husband they'd defended for years suddenly looked indefensible. He tried reaching me again. Long messages this time. Apologies threaded with blame. Regret mixed with bargaining. "You're ruining everything. This could have been handled privately." She didn't mean for it to go public. I read them once, then archived them. The legal consequences followed next. My attorney filed the initial paperwork. Clean, precise, no theatrics. He was served at work, which was unfortunate timing, but not my responsibility. He called me immediately after. "This is extreme," he said. "You're moving too fast." "I moved exactly as fast as you did," I replied. "You just didn't think I'd catch up." That night, the woman stopped answering his calls. I know because he showed up at the house unannounced, voice tight, eyes hollow, asking if I'd heard from her. He looked stunned, not heartbroken, but destabilized. Like someone who'd mistaken a ladder for a foundation. I didn't invite him in. "She blocked me," he said. "This isn't how it was supposed to go." "None of this is," I said. He stood there for a long moment, searching my face for something. Sympathy, nostalgia, leverage. He found nothing. As he walked away, I felt something unfamiliar settle into place. Not satisfaction, relief, because the consequences were no longer theoretical. They were real, unfolding, and irreversible. And for the first time since that night, I knew one thing with certainty. He finally understood that this wasn't a phase. It was the beginning of the end. Family court doesn't feel dramatic until it is. We were scheduled for a temporary orders hearing, custody, finances, access. He arrived early, dressed carefully, hair styled the way he used to before client meetings. She was with him, not beside him, behind him. That detail mattered. She wore sunglasses indoors and kept checking her phone, thumbs moving too fast, eyes darting toward anyone who looked familiar. She hadn't been prepared for this kind of public. Restaurants were one thing. This was official. This was a place where stories turn into records. When he saw me, he smiled like we were still capable of polite fiction. "We can talk," he said, stepping forward. "Through counsel," I replied, without stopping. His attorney shifted. Mine nodded once. We took our seats on opposite sides of the room. People stared. Not openly, but long enough to recognize us. A woman leaned toward her friend and whispered. A man across the aisle watched with the kind of curiosity reserved for cautionary tales. My husband leaned toward the woman behind him. "It'll be quick," he said. "Just stay close." She didn't answer. The clerk called our case. We stood. The judge wasn't ready yet, so we waited, standing, exposed, suspended in that awkward space where no one knows what to do with their hands. That's when she finally spoke. "I can't do this," she said quietly. He frowned. "What?" "This," she repeated, gesturing around. "All of it." He laughed once, strained. "It's just paperwork." "No," she said. "It's consequences." The word hung there, loud enough for the people closest to us to hear. She stepped back, then another step. He reached for her arm. "Don't," she said sharply, pulling away. "You told me she knew. You told me this was settled." I turned then, not to him, to her. "It wasn't," I said. "And it isn't." Her face flushed. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. She looked at him like she was seeing him clearly for the first time. Without the story, he'd sold her attached. "I didn't sign up to be hated," she said. "I didn't sign up to sit in a courthouse like this." "You signed up to replace someone," I replied. "That comes with visibility." She swallowed, took off the sunglasses. Her eyes were red. "I'm leaving," she said to him. "Figure it out yourself." And just like that, she walked away. Not dramatically. Not angrily. Efficiently. The benches rustled. Someone whispered, "Wow." My husband stood there, stunned, watching the door swing shut behind her. His mouth opened, closed, then settled into something small and tight. The judge entered. Everyone stood. We sat. The hearing was brief. Temporary custody granted to me. Exclusive use of the house confirmed. Financial restrictions upheld. The language was clean, unemotional, devastating in its precision. When it ended, the judge stood. We stood. People began to file out. My husband stayed seated. I gathered my things and turned to leave. As I passed him, he finally looked up. "You didn't have to humiliate me like this." he said, voice low. I stopped. This time, I didn't keep my voice quiet. You humiliated yourself the moment you thought replacing me in public would be painless, I said. I'm just making sure it's documented. The words traveled. Not shouted, but clear. The kind that get repeated. Someone near the door raised their eyebrows. A man by the benches nodded once, slowly, like he'd just watched something inevitable conclude. I didn't wait for a response. As I walked out, my phone buzzed. A message from a friend. That line is already everywhere. Good. Outside, the sun was sharp and honest. I stood there for a second, breathing it in, feeling something settle that hadn't before. This wasn't closure. This was correction. And behind me, inside that building, a man sat alone, publicly abandoned, officially constrained, finally stripped of the illusion that he was still in control. He tried to get ahead of it. That was his mistake. 2 days after the courthouse, a post went up on his social media, carefully worded, sympathetic, polished like something written with help. He talked about private matters, misunderstandings, and the importance of protecting children from adult conflict. He didn't mention the restaurant. He didn't mention the banner. He didn't mention the woman who walked out of court without looking back. He framed himself as overwhelmed, as attacked, as a man being punished for mistakes that had been blown out of proportion. People read it. Some even liked it. Then the receipts started to drop. Not from me, from everyone else. A former coworker posted a screenshot of a calendar invite labeled Celebration Dinner, dated weeks before the restaurant. Another shared a clip from that night, clear audio this time, his voice unmistakable, laughing while someone asked if his wife knew. A woman from his office commented, then deleted, then reposted with a single sentence. This wasn't an accident. The algorithm did the rest. Someone created a hashtag. It wasn't clever. It was accurate. It paired his name with a word that doesn't fade quickly. Within hours, it was everywhere. Under his post, under the video, under articles that hadn't even been written yet but were clearly coming. He texted me in a panic. Did you do this? You're destroying my reputation. Make them stop. I didn't answer. Because the truth is, I didn't have to do anything. He had mistaken silence for protection. What he forgot was that silence doesn't belong to the guilty. It belongs to the patient. By evening, local blogs picked it up. Then a regional outlet. They didn't editorialize. They didn't need to. They laid out the timeline, the public celebration, the married status, the child mentioned in passing, the court hearing that followed. Facts have weight when they're stacked correctly. His employer issued a statement the next morning, neutral, brief, distancing. We are aware of the situation. We are reviewing internal policies. That phrase is corporate for you're on thin ice. By lunchtime, his profile photo was gone. His comments were turned off. The post was deleted. Screenshots remained. People started asking questions he couldn't answer. Why had he involved his daughter? Why had he used shared funds? Why had he made it public if he wanted privacy? He tried to spin again. A second post went up, longer this time, defensive, less controlled. He blamed stress. He blamed miscommunication. He implied I was unstable without using the word. That's when it turned. Someone replied with a photo of the inheritance transfer document. Redacted but recognizable. Another posted a time-stamped message showing he'd lied about when the affair started. A woman commented, "He tried this with me too." And then another echoed it. The narrative snapped cleanly in half. What had been a scandal became a pattern. I watched it happen from my kitchen table, my phone face down. Friends checked in, offering updates I didn't ask for. My attorney called once to say, "This is going exactly how it usually does when someone underestimates public memory." That night, my daughter asked why Dad's name was on the news. "Because he made choices that affected a lot of people," I said. "And now people are talking about it. Is it going to hurt you?" she asked. "No," I said honestly. "It's already over for me." It wasn't over for him. The next day, his employer suspended him pending review. Not fired, yet, but removed. Visible consequences matter more than final ones. They tell the story before the ending is written. He showed up at the house again that evening. This time, he didn't knock. He rang the bell over and over until the sound echoed through the hallway like a warning. I opened the door just enough to see him. "You have to help me," he said. His voice was hoarse, panicked. "They're calling me things. I can't go anywhere. I can't fix this." I looked at him. Really looked. The confidence was gone. The certainty. The belief that he could talk his way out of anything. "This is what accountability looks like," I said. "It feels loud because you avoided it quietly for a long time." He dropped his head into his hands. "I said I was sorry," he whispered. "Yes," I replied. "After you were exposed." He looked up, eyes wet. "Please, say something. Anything. You have influence now." I shook my head. "I don't need to speak," I said. "The truth is already doing that for me." As I closed the door, his phone buzzed again. Another notification. Another update he couldn't outrun. Inside, I leaned against the wall and breathed. This wasn't cruelty. This wasn't revenge in the way movies sell it. This was consequence meeting daylight. And once something lives in daylight long enough, it never fully goes back into the dark. The legal part didn't feel dramatic while it was happening. It felt methodical, almost quiet, like watching a structure come apart one bolt at a time. By the time the divorce formally moved forward, the illusion of shared ownership was already gone. My attorney filed motions that weren't aggressive, just accurate, tracing funds, establishing timelines, separating what was marital from what had been absorbed without consent. The inheritance became central, not emotionally, but mathematically. Numbers don't care about excuses. He tried to argue that everything was shared. That intention mattered more than origin. The judge didn't agree. The house stayed with me. The accounts tied to my consulting work were confirmed as separate. The joint savings, what remained of it, was split in a way that reflected contribution, not entitlement. Temporary support was denied. His income, once framed as the backbone of our family, now worked against him. The higher it had been, the harder it was to claim vulnerability. He sat there during hearings with his hands folded too tightly, nodding when his attorney spoke, wincing when mine did. Every time a document was introduced, he flinched, not because it was surprising, but because it was permanent. Paper trails have memory. Custody was resolved faster than I expected. Not because he didn't want our daughter, but because his recent choices worked against the version of himself he needed to present. Inconsistent schedules, poor judgment, documented instability. The court didn't punish him. It protected her. Primary custody was awarded to me. He received structured visitation, predictable, supervised at first. He didn't argue that part. Outside the courtroom, his family began to fracture. His mother called once. She cried. Not for him, for what he'd cost everyone else. She apologized without trying to soften it. She said she didn't recognize the man he'd become, and then she said something that stayed with me. He thought he was smarter than consequences. His father didn't call at all. Instead, his brother sent a message. We're stepping back. Don't involve us. Financial support he'd always assumed would be there. Quiet loans, informal help, family safety nets. Disappeared. Not with confrontation. With absence. The woman he'd celebrated vanished completely. Not a word. Not a message. She removed herself from the narrative the way people do when they realize they're not built for long-term fallout. I didn't blame her. She hadn't broken vows. She'd just believed a man who was practiced at rewriting reality. Without her, without family backing, without unrestricted access to money, his world narrowed quickly. The suspension at work became termination. The reason wasn't the scandal, it was trust. Clients had asked questions. Partners didn't want their names near his. Reputation isn't morality, it's risk management. He rented a small place on the other side of town. Temporary at first, then longer than he'd planned. I heard this secondhand. I didn't ask. What surprised me most wasn't how much he lost. It was how little I missed. The house felt different without him. Lighter. Quieter in a way that wasn't lonely. My daughter adjusted faster than I expected. Kids do when adults stop lying. She asked fewer questions once she realized answers wouldn't change every week. One afternoon, she said, "Dad seems tired all the time." "He is," I said. "Being dishonest takes work." That night, he called. I almost didn't answer. Almost. "I didn't think it would be like this," he said. No anger. Just exhaustion. "I know," I replied. "I thought people would understand." "They did," I said. "Just not in the way you wanted." There was a long pause. "I don't have anything left," he said. I closed my eyes, not out of pity, but out of finality. "That's not true," I said. "You still have the lesson." He didn't respond. When I hung up, I felt something settle that hadn't before. Not victory, completion. Because the dismantling was done. The systems he'd leaned on, financial, familial, emotional, had corrected themselves. No shouting, no spectacle, just alignment. And from that point on, there was nothing left to take. Only one final boundary to draw. The last time we met wasn't dramatic in the way people imagine endings. There was no raised voice, no crowded room, no witnesses waiting to be impressed. It happened on a weekday afternoon, in a neutral place chosen for its lack of memory. A coffee shop near the courthouse. Bright. Clean. Anonymous. He was already there when I arrived, sitting near the window, hands wrapped around a paper cup he hadn't touched. He looked smaller. Not physically, something else. Like the version of himself that once took up space had been quietly folded away. I didn't hug him. I didn't ask how he was. I sat down, set my bag beside me, and waited. He cleared his throat. "Thank you for coming." "This is the last time," I said, not unkindly, just clearly. He nodded. "I know." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Outside, people passed by carrying drinks, laughing, living. I noticed how little the world cares about personal collapse. "I lost my job," he said finally. "I'm aware." "I'm not telling you to make you feel bad," he added quickly. He stopped. Rethought it. I don't know how this became my life. I studied his face. The lines around his eyes were deeper. His hair wasn't styled anymore. The confidence he'd worn like armor had been replaced by something exposed and uncertain. "It didn't become your life," I said. "It revealed it." He flinched. "I made mistakes," he said. "I know that. I'm not denying it." "Mistakes are accidents," I replied. "You made decisions." He looked down at his hands. "I never meant to hurt you." I leaned back in my chair. "That's the problem. You never meant anything beyond yourself." He swallowed hard. "I loved you." I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't have one, but because I wanted to choose the right truth. "You loved what I provided," I said. "Stability. Cover. A version of yourself that looked respectable." "That's not fair," he whispered. "It's accurate," I replied. "And accuracy is all that's left between us." His eyes filled, not theatrically, quietly. He wiped them with the heel of his hand and laughed once, broken and embarrassed. "I don't have anyone," he said. "My family won't take my calls." She disappeared. I wake up every day and it's just quiet. I felt something then. But it wasn't guilt, it was distance. "You're describing consequences," I said. "Not loneliness." He looked up at me, desperate now. "I need your help." There it was. The real reason he'd asked to meet. "I can't give it," I said immediately. "Just a statement," he said quickly. "One post. Something to say we're working things out. People think you hate me." "I don't hate you," I said. "I outgrew you." He stared at me like I'd spoken another language. "You have influence," he insisted. "You could soften this. You could make it stop." I shook my head. This doesn't stop because you're uncomfortable. It stops when it finishes teaching you what you refuse to learn privately. His jaw tightened. So, that's it? You're just going to watch me fall apart? I met his eyes. You're not falling apart. You're standing where you put yourself. Silence stretched between us again. This one heavier than the first. After a moment, his voice dropped. Do you ever think about forgiving me? I considered the question carefully. Not because it tempted me, but because I wanted to answer honestly. Forgiveness isn't the same as access, I said. You're confusing peace with permission. He exhaled slowly. I don't recognize you anymore. That's because you only knew the version of me that tolerated you, I replied. He leaned back, defeated. I thought if I lost everything, at least I'd still have you. I stood. That's the lie you told yourself, I said. You lost me the moment you decided I was replaceable. I picked up my bag and stepped away from the table. He didn't follow. He didn't call out. He just sat there, staring at the untouched coffee like it held an answer he'd missed. At the door, I turned back once, not to offer comfort, but to finish what needed finishing. You asked me once what I wanted, I said. Here's the answer you never listened to. He looked up. I want a life where I never have to explain my worth to someone who gambled it. I walked out. The sun was warm, the sidewalk solid under my feet. My phone buzzed in my bag, but I didn't reach for it. I didn't need updates anymore. I didn't need validation. Behind me, in that quiet coffee shop, a man sat alone with the full weight of his choices. And ahead of me, for the first time in a long time, there was nothing pulling me backward. Only space. Only forward. Time doesn't heal in the way people promise. It clarifies. 6 months passed before I noticed the quiet had changed. It was no longer the absence of him. It was the presence of myself. Mornings felt unhurried. The house settled into a rhythm that belonged to us, not to what we'd been managing around. My daughter grew taller in that time. Stronger, too. Not hardened. Clear. She asked fewer questions about why things happened and more about what came next. We built routines that didn't revolve around disappointment. Sunday walks, late dinners where no one checked a phone, laughter that didn't feel like relief. Work followed the same pattern. I took contracts I'd once declined, led projects instead of supporting them. People responded differently when I stopped explaining myself. Confidence, I learned, isn't loud. It's decisive. Occasionally, his name surfaced. A mutual acquaintance would mention a move that didn't work out, a job that fell through, a life that stayed stalled, not with cruelty, with indifference. That was the difference. He became a story without relevance. The house changed too. I repainted the room we'd argued in the most, gave away furniture that carried tension, and kept the things that felt neutral, then let them become mine. My mother's photo stayed on the shelf where I could see it every morning. That felt right. One evening, my daughter asked, "Are you happier now?" I thought about it. Really thought. "Yes," I said. "Because I'm honest." She smiled. That was enough. I didn't block him out of anger. I let him go because boundaries need consistency. The court handled logistics. I handled my peace. The two never overlapped again. Sometimes, in quieter moments, I reflected on the night that started everything. The lights, the banner, the certainty with which he believed he could erase me publicly and move on cleanly. I realized then how small his vision had been. He thought freedom came from replacing. I learned it comes from refusing to be replaceable. There was no dramatic triumph at the end. No moment where everything felt perfect. Just a steady sense of alignment, of life matching truth again. That was enough. Betrayal doesn't destroy you when you stop carrying it. It becomes information, a marker, a line you never cross again. I didn't get closure from him. I got it from leaving. And that turned out to be the most powerful ending of all. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If this story made you feel seen, understood, or a little stronger, click the hype button and let it land. I'd really love to hear your thoughts, or your own experience, in the comments. You never know who might need your words. And if stories like this matter to you, hit subscribe and the like button so you don't miss the next one. I'm glad you were here with me.